very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on our programme this week, Iran restores internet access after a deadly crackdown on demonstrations over rising fuel prices. We bring you a report looking back at some of the country's most significant protest movements over the past decade. Lebanon protesters and Hezbollah supporters clash in the capital. The violence is threatening to tip largely peaceful demonstrations directed at the country's ruling elite. Also coming up on our programme this week, we'll be joined by the Committee to Protect Journalists, Justin Shilad, to talk about the government crackdown on media outlets in Egypt. Rights groups say security forces have detained over 3,000 people since September, including journalists and activists. Thank you for watching Middle East Matters. Now we start with Iran, where a week-long internet blackout has finally been lifted. This in the aftermath of violent protests over increased fuel prices. That's between 50 to 300%, as well as general discontentment. Now, according to Amnesty International, the movement and the subsequent government crackdown left at least 143 people dead. And this isn't the first time Iranians are taking to the streets. France 24's Cole Stangler takes a look back at the country's three major protest movements over the past decade, including one in 2009 and the unrest at the end of 2017 into 2018.
Known by supporters as the Green Movement, tens of thousands took to the streets in June 2009, protesting the re-election of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Accusing authorities of electoral fraud, many backed pro-reform challenger Mir Hossein Mousavi. But state repression came quick, with riot police and volunteer militia deployed. And after several months of protests, dozens were left dead and thousands arrested. In December 2017, another wave of protests kicked off, starting in the conservative city of Mashhad before spreading across the country. This time, popular anger focused largely on the economy, with the working class base of demonstrators protesting over inflation and the rising cost of living.
These protests are driven by the working class, people who've been hit by major economic problems.
After more than a week of protests, President Rouhani said demands were legitimate, all the while condemning violence. Weeks ago, it was the surprise announcement of a hike in fuel prices that sparked unrest. The socioeconomically diverse movement has railed against corruption and mismanagement, as well as economic woes, which have only grown since last May after the U.S. reimposed sanctions. Government repression has been fierce. In these images, filmed in the city of Shiraz, snipers can be seen shooting at crowds from a helicopter. Authorities also imposed a week-long near-total blackout of the internet. They claim foreign rivals are behind the demonstrations.
It's not the Israelis or the Americans or Saudi Arabia who are plotting or sending people into the streets. However, US sanctions have deepened the economic crisis. But the discontent of the population and of rioters goes beyond the question of the economy. The demands are social and economic, but also cultural and political.
The government has confirmed 5 deaths as a result of the protests. According to Amnesty International, at least 143 people have died.
Over to Lebanon, where clashes between protesters and supporters of the Shiite Hezbollah group are threatening to send the country crashing further down. On one side, protesters chanted Shia, Shia, Shia. The other side responded with Hezbollah is terrorist. Our team on the ground met supporters of the Hezbollah party. Here's a clip from their long-format documentary.
On October 29th, henchmen armed with sticks and knives attacked the protesters' home base. They were supporters in the pay of Amal, the Shiite party of Nabi Berri, the Speaker of Parliament. The attackers came from this neighborhood near the city center, a stronghold of the Amal party. The Speaker of Parliament watches over the area. His image adorns the walls, and he enjoys popular support here.
We like President Barry. He's the one who fought for us. He worked hard for us. He found us work in the public sector in the best positions. He fought against Israel in southern Lebanon. It's true that there are poor people who are protesting, but there are also so many people who protest just to take selfies.
Which poor people are you talking about? The protesters? They have the best kind of life there is. Some of them eat plates of sushi that cost $10 each. And you want me to believe they are poor?
They are funded by suspicious people who want to destroy the country. They do not want Lebanon to succeed, that's for sure.
Let's be clear, this is a revolution by drug addicts, prostitutes, junkies, and whatever else you want. That's not a revolution.
Another Shiite party holds seats in the government, Hezbollah, or God's Party in Arabic. Party leader Hassan Nasrallah strikes a conciliatory tone, but the concern is palpable. Now on the street, the pro-Iranian party's hold over Lebanon is openly criticized. On the Day of the Martyrs, those who died fighting Israel or Syria are honored.
The protesters ignore what we have gone through. My father passed away. Our martyrs fought for them to defend their honor. Yet they put everyone in the same box.
They're political protesters. They're trying to disarm Hezbollah, and then they insult Hassan Nasrallah. You think that we've joined protesters that insult our father?
Over to Egypt and the latest crackdown on media. Over the weekend, security forces stormed the offices of an investigative media outlet and detained its staff for several hours. Now, according to Mada Masr, 2 freelance translators and 2 crew members from France 24 were also present in the office and questioned during that raid. This comes amid a wider crackdown on dissent and free speech. For more, I'd like to welcome Justin Shilad to the programme. He's the Committee to Protect Journalists, Middle East and North Africa Research Associate. He joins us from New York. Justin, thank you so much for being with us. Now, this was one of Egypt's last major independent media outlets, was it not?
Yes, it is. And it still is currently one of the last independent media outlets. They are, as far as we know, still operational and still reporting the news.
So they're still operating, but of course there has been a crackdown and there have been calls from the international community to enable media freedom in the country. But that doesn't seem to be enough, does it? What does the CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, recommend here?
I think that this is a very, very concerning case for us because it represents a new front in the Egyptian authorities' war, and at this point it is a war against independent critical press in the country. The raid on Mada Masr comes after authorities arrested at least 8 journalists in the aftermath of protests that we saw in September. And this is on the heels of a campaign that's lasted years, ever since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took power, against any reporting that could be remotely embarrassing to authorities. I think that at the very bare minimum, there need to be assurances from authorities that there will be no more arrests, intimidation, harassment of Mada Masr. But then that's really only the starting point. What we want to see is all journalists who are in jail for their work released from prison, an end to this harassment, an end to the censorship and blocking of websites, and an end to the probationary measures against journalists such as Shaukan, who have to spend up to 12 hours of each day in a police station.
And of course, this isn't an isolated case in the region. We have crackdowns on Iran, on Lebanon.
Absolutely, yes. It's a region-wide problem for sure. And I think that's also what's particularly disturbing here too. What happens in Egypt or what happens in one country in the region does not happen in a vacuum. It's a problem for the entire Middle East, North Africa region, and indeed the world. I think that with the authorities in this region, even those whom have significant conflicts with one another, they're very much reading from each other's playbooks in suppressing critical and independent media. And that's what's so disturbing about this case. If the Egyptian authorities can crack down on a widely read and respected independent media outlet like this and not face strong pushback from the international community, that sends a signal to the rest of the governments in the region. Fortunately, in this case, there was a pretty strong outcry, both domestically in Egypt and internationally. But I think that there needs to be that sustained pressure in order for journalists in the region to be able to do their jobs.
Justin Shilad of the CPJ talking to us about the suppression of media across the region. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on Middle East Matters.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We end our programme this week with a Syrian Billy Elliot. 27-year-old Ahmad Judda, who was unable to fulfill his dream to dance in his war-torn country, fled to the Netherlands, and a documentary about him, Dance or Die, has just received an Emmy Award. Here's a France 24 report about that dancer.
Dance or Die is more than a neck tattoo, it's his way of life. After fleeing Syria, Ahmed Jodeh now studies ballet in Amsterdam.
Dance is my religion, if I make it short. So it's my way of living, it's the reason that I could survive, the reason that I am alive. Because when I was in Syria, I finished my school, I had to go to the army, and I was threatened by extremist people.
Those extremist people were none other than the Islamic State group. Ahmad became famous after taking part in a TV show, So You Think You Can Dance, but it also made him a target. Jihadists threatened to kill him for being a bad influence on young Muslims. In a dangerous act of defiance, Ahmad danced in the ruins of Palmyra, where the terror group had shot propaganda videos.
They were sending me texts or calling me or on Facebook, sharing my pictures, asking for my head.
Ahmad's story touched the director of the Dutch National Ballet, who helped him escape to Amsterdam. Ahmad is now using his gift to help others by teaching children to overcome the trauma of war through dance.
Well, that's it from us this week. Thank you for watching.